This is the France 24 debate. In part one, we saw an excerpt of Mathieu Mabin's story, The Tripoli Brigade, which you can watch in full in Reporters, the France 24 investigative news magazine, which airs for the first time this Thursday evening at 9:30 p.m. Paris time. And we're discussing with our panel just who are the liberators of Tripoli, and is Libya in safe hands? Here to talk about it with us is France 24's Chris Moore, just back from the Libyan capital, Kamel Almarash, a Libyan reporter who's based here in Paris, and from Afrique Asie magazine, Augusta Conchiglia. Before the break, I want to pick up on a point that Chris Moore made. 35 different, what is it you said?
We think there are about 35 different rebel battalions, brigades, if you want to call them that, from various cities across Libya in Tripoli at the time we were there.
And I want to get your reaction to something. He says that the 35, what distinguishes them most is not the tribe, but the city or the town that they come from.
The distinction, one goal is to fight Gaddafi, to get rid of Gaddafi. I think they operated in Tripoli because Tripoli is the capital of Libyans. They come from Misrata, they come from Garian, they come from Zintan, they come from other cities, and they came to free Tripoli, and they did that successfully, and Gaddafi now is out of Tripoli. People are celebrating this victory, and now I think the Brigade of Tripoli is taking over the security of Tripoli. That's because they see a lot of people who hand arms from different other cities, and they ask them to leave Tripoli, to go to the other fronts, because the war is not over.
Did you see signs, Chris, when you were in Tripoli last week, of that power vacuum starting to be filled?
In terms of life getting back to normal, it was actually amazing how quickly things calmed down, as it were, before the last of the Gaddafi snipers were pushed out. But as we've seen, it's taken a long time for the NTC to move into Tripoli. They still haven't fully done so. They are, in a way, a bit of an unknown quantity, and I think a lot of people in Tripoli are looking for leadership as quickly as possible.
And in many parts of the capital, they have set up the equivalent of neighborhood watches, you might call them, that ensure law and order, with the likes of lawyers, accountants, footballers, manning checkpoints. Did you see any of those, Chris?
Lots of that, yeah, especially in the first 48 hours. We arrived the day after, very early in the morning, after the fall of Bab al-Zizia. The situation was incredibly tense. The streets were deserted, and you really did see citizens looking after their city street by street, setting up checkpoints. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of guns in Libya right now. It was a case of armed citizens, mainly local young men, really guarding their streets by door, house by house. Everybody else really remaining inside. And in the first sort of 48 hours or so, there was an atmosphere of mistrust. Everybody knows that everybody else is armed, and nobody was really quite sure who is who. There were potential, for example, in terms of checkpoints for people who looked like rebels, who may just have had their own agenda, set up their own checkpoints, and that kind of thing. As I said, the atmosphere did ease fairly quickly after those first couple of days.
And the international community, and it's a point that we saw in that report by Mathieu Mabin, people being rounded up, not sure where they're being taken in that report. The international community worried about retribution, worried about vigilante justice. We can show you images of several dozen Somalis and sub-Saharan Africans who were handed over the weekend to the UN Refugee Agency.
Well, we are here almost 5 days now. But the first day, they bring us here in the morning, they beat us, ask us, are you involved in this war? We told them that no, we didn't involve in this war. They beat us, the same thing we told them, we didn't involve in this war. We are here for work.
Augusta Conchiglia.
In fact, something that was really appalling in the reports before, it was just how the harassment against the black people, foreigner or not, is continuing. And yesterday, the president of the EU Commission said that he received a letter from the president of the NTC assuring him that everything will be done to stop it, but I see that it's not the case, and a few days ago it was still going on. So there is this sort of tension and it's evident that the incapacity of controlling the troops. And another thing is that actually people were really coming from everywhere, is that Tripoli didn't have their own capacity of freedom itself. I don't know whether you have...
Well, Tripoli did rise up on the night before the rebels advanced. Coming back to the issue, as we saw in the report there, of a dark-skinned man being taken aside by the rebels. I don't think anyone's denying that this is a serious problem in Libya right now. It's a pretty complicated one. I mean, there are dark-skinned Libyans who've been there for a long time. There are sub-Saharan Africans who were brought in by Gaddafi, given jobs and
some are second
cars.
generation, right?
And there are some mercenaries. But I'm not going to deny that, particularly within the rebel rank and file, they lump these people into the same box and treat them as if they were mercenaries.
That's the problem. But nobody can deny that Gaddafi has, recruited mercenaries from Africa to come and kill Libyans. And people who are fighting for Libya, they think that colored people or black people are, coming for Libya to killing Libyans.
It's something you hear a lot among the rank and file of the rebel brigades.
I mean, there is Libyans who are, blacks. There is Libyan blacks who
and there are black people with black skin fighting for the rebels as well.
The same treatment. There's no distinction between a black man coming from Africa or black man coming from Libya, from the south, because there's a lot. This situation of confusion is normal, I think. But the reality from now on, the CNT have to do something about it. They have to stop all, this arrestation for colored people, and they should, take a strong action against people who are, treated people, black people, in that way. Now the battle is over in Tripoli. There is no need to arrest people just because they are black. That's right.
And I want to pick up also on another point you made, which is all the weapons. They're not just small arms. An example of what's fueling those concerns, human rights groups sounding the alarm over an unguarded warehouse that they unveiled Wednesday in Tripoli, where sophisticated weapons had been looted.
If they fall into the hands of the wrong people, they're capable of bringing down civilian aircraft. I mean, we're really talking about the kind of weapons that groups like Al-Qaeda and also Iran and other countries want to get their hands on for the technology.
How serious a problem is this?
To say that Libya is a heavily armed country is an understatement. It's phenomenal, the number of weapons in that country. In terms of handguns on the streets of Tripoli, right from the start of the uprising, arms have played a very important role. Gaddafi arms depots were emptied by the rebels very early on. Gaddafi, of course, himself distributed arms to citizens. Various overseas powers were sending in weapons. We saw there was a French arms drop at one point, which the French were very loath to admit for a while. And then in the late stage of the conflict, the rebels have started triumphing. You just see them emptying. We saw them emptying one of the Khamis Brigade depots outside Tripoli. And who knows exactly where all of these are going to end up, and who knows how a decommissioning process can get underway when there are simply so many weapons involved.
The most dangerous thing facing NTC now is collecting arms, and there's information that people are hiding arms now. They are, hiding them underground. People live in the fear that maybe they need them in the future, and
maybe they can sell them.
They can sell them as well, yes, because the traders of war existed, not in Libya, in other cases of war, but the real work for NTC now, the first one, I think, in my point of view, is to collect arms from all people who are armed. Of course, now they're saying battle is not over, but not really. In Tripoli is over. in other cities, battle is over. Maybe in Bani Walid and Surat in Sabha, but they have to do that in a very strict manner. They won't, leave arms like this, people hanging with arms in the streets, and that would give an impression that situation is not under control by the NTC.
I really think it would be difficult to withdraw, to collect weapons in this situation, not only because there is insecurity and question for the future, but also because there is not yet a structure which is representative enough to make the people feel that they are part of the future. So if the NTC is not clear on how to call for a reconciliation, there must be something. There is a statement about Fatih Bajar, who is the head of political affairs in the NTC, saying that we learned from Iraq that we shouldn't do the same thing and just destroy what existed, army, police, etc. We have to call them back, which is something good. But
you bring up an important point there, Augusto Conciglia, which is whose job is it to keep the peace at this point, and not NATO's, argues Steve Clemens of The Atlantic. In an article, he praises the decision to resist the temptation of an Iraq-style U.S.-led occupation. He writes, what Obama's intervention in Libya accomplished was giving Libyans an opportunity to own the outcome. This is the same kind of approach that the international community needs to take as Libya takes its next steps, give support, technical counsel and advice if asked, but be respectful of the process that's now going to have to evolve inside Libya to include many players and groups that have been excluded from power for decades. Chris Moore, was there the unseen hand of foreign powers lurking behind every street corner when you were there?
I don't know whether you could say that. What you can say is that the NTC is going to face a huge task now that their common enemy is gone. I don't think anyone is denying that, not least in a country which had the same ruler for 42 years and didn't have the same kind of institutions as, say, Egypt or Tunisia. I mean, there's a lot of ex-Gaddafi figures in the NTC, but at the same time, you can say that the old apparatus, if you like, has been washed away in a way which it wasn't in Egypt and Tunisia. It really is a case of starting from zero in many ways. As I said, my concern is that there are rival groups there, and a lot of them are heavily armed.
So, Kamel Al-Marash, we're going to avoid the Iraq scenario. The Libyans are going to own the outcome.
Yes, but in adding that Libya needs the assistance of the international community in matters of security now, because all the security apparatus now is broken. Nobody has trust in another person. I think in the future weeks, Libya needs to the international community assistance in matters of security to secure Tripoli first from this armed person who don't want to give back these arms after the battle is over in Tripoli.
Of course, Augusto Conciglia, right now, that's all speculation. And to see the glass half full, what you can say is that Muammar Gaddafi promised there would be rivers of blood in Tripoli, and there were at least 1,000 killed. It was a very violent battle for Tripoli, but there haven't been rivers of blood as was announced.
Yes, but we have to take into account that for some 5 months, the NATO forces were bombing heavily. So, I mean, there is, in the relation of forces, there have been an element that has weighted a lot. I mean, we cannot forget it. And this is also something the NTC has to deal in terms of inheritance. Are they able to be on their own, make their own choices and make their own policy? Now is the question of being grateful enough with foreign friends to give them privileged position, etc. So everything is on the table today, and things are not clear. But as far as a foreign presence, I have heard the NTC saying that they do not want even the UN to be there. Only a few dozen of observers are admitted, but they said they wouldn't like to have foreign troops. So maybe this is another issue to be discussed.
Chris, 30,000 killed is the estimate in a conflict involving a country of only 6 million people. That's huge.
Well, it became an armed uprising very, very quickly, and of course, the minute NATO got involved, the stakes became very high. And I think on both sides, really, it was always going to be a fight to the end. What I wanted to ask Kamel Al-Marash really was when you talk about a foreign presence in Libya or international aid in terms of assuring security, what do you mean?
I mean, not necessarily a foreign soldier has been there. I mean, security experts who can, form Libyans. Yes, but not enough. We have maybe some of them in Tripoli now, but we need them in other cities, not necessarily in Tripoli. And I think we need them also to form the army, the national army, which should start now being built. The national army would be charged to disarm people in the long term, in the long term, because people are hiding arms.
All right, so the battle for disarmament only beginning. One final point before we go.
Because that took a lot of time, I think.
One final point before we go. Saddam Hussein stayed at large for 8 months in Iraq after the fall of Baghdad. Muammar Gaddafi, nowhere to be found for now, but he's again been talking to Syrian television.
The young are now ready to step up their attacks against the rats in Tripoli and everywhere to eliminate the mercenaries. They're trivial, their masters will abandon them.
With towns like Bani Walid, Sabah and Sirte still holding out, what happens next now?
What I think is some fanatic elements of Gaddafi are hijacking people in Sirte and Bani Walid and in Sabha. And I think the deadline which given by the NTC should be respected. I think there's no way to give them another deadline. If we give them another deadline, that will end in their favor. That will end, they will, impose their conditions. I think that NTC should, impose resender for all fanatic elements in these cities. And I think there are few fanatic elements who would not be able to live these cities alone.
All right, so no deadline, please, says Kamel Al-Marash. I want to thank you. I want to thank Augusta Conchiglia and Chris Moore for joining us. And thank you for being with us here for the France 24 debate. Stay with us. Business is next, and it's hosted by Marcus Carlson.